Hi, I'm Eric Internicola, and I'm really excited to talk to you today about using virtual reality as a development paradigm. It's going to be a fun talk. We have a lot to cover. I work for Onyx
Right,
Maps.
Eric, we are seeing your presenter control. You need to show the.
Yeah, that's not ideal. Sorry about that. I thought I had this figured out. Let me try that again. That should be better. All right, thanks for the heads up. Yeah, so we're hiring. We have a number of engineering positions open. And you're probably wondering why we're here. So if you're like me, you're really excited to hear about the possibility of doing development in virtual reality. When I heard about it, though, I was hesitantly optimistic, but I figured it sounds too gimmicky to be true. So I'm doing my talk today using virtual reality, and I've been attending the conference as well in virtual reality to demonstrate that it is in fact a compelling experience and it's not gimmicky. So VR, okay, cool. But also, why? There's so many reasons. You get to be the cool kid. You'll be the envy of all the other developers that you know. All right, on a serious note, it has major productivity implications. It's a lot easier to carry around your laptop and a set of VR goggles than your laptop and, say, 4 additional screens. So I've got a number of video demos. You'll notice I have 5 screens in this particular setup. This is typically how I organize things. It's my de facto environment setup in VR. So I've got a full screen terminal. I've got a full screen code editor. I've got a full screen web browser for GitHub. I've got another full screen for notes. And finally, I've got a screen that's split between an iOS simulator and music. And did I mention that I can also flip between virtual screens as well? So by simply turning my head, I can glean information without having to command tab or control arrow key between different desktop screens. This is incredibly convenient. So we'll talk about the hardware. What I'm wearing right now, this is the Oculus Quest 2 made by Facebook. And so I regularly use this setup on my iMac, i9 MacBook Pro, and a M1 MacBook Air. I've had great experiences with every single one of these machines using this VR setup. So now we'll talk about the software pieces that make this come together. So Immersed Vr is the software, and this is an Austin-based Techstars startup. They've specifically targeted software developers as their initial demographic, and they're doing a bunch of user studies and releasing software and really targeting us as the power users to figure out what are the features we need. On the computer, there's a desktop agent, and they support Mac, Windows, and Linux. The agent is responsible for acting as a virtual Windows server, similar to X Windows, if you're familiar with that. And on the VR headset, there's the Immersed app. And so this app itself is free in the App Store. Some of the features, though, you do have to subscribe to, but they have a free tier that it just works for. And so you don't actually have to buy anything. So yeah, there's an iOS app and it'll broadcast your screen. So it's this virtual screen that mirrors your iPhone, and it's useful-ish. To use it in VR and interact with it the way you do in real reality, you basically have to position it in virtual reality exactly where it is in real reality. Next, I'm going to talk about the set of features that I find most useful. So it's easy to reconfigure your screens. There are a number of gestures and menus that you interact with. So you can resize your screens individually or as a group. You can move them around. And you can do that individually or as a group. You can make your screens flat or curved. And you can change the amount of curvature and even the angle when they're flat. It's worth mentioning in real reality, I'm a flat screen preferrer, but in virtual reality, I actually find that the curvature is helpful. And so you can see me interacting with these screens as a group, individually. And then hiding the menus. And the color of my hands changes. That light color essentially means that I'm done interacting. And so now I can just get on working and I won't impact any of my configuration accidentally. All right, so scenery. There are a whole bunch of 360 backgrounds that you can select and they're built in. You can define your own even. It's not something I've done yet, just because they have so many. A number of these backgrounds are static, so there's no motion. It's basically just wallpaper. Some of them have animation. For some, it's subtle. For some, it's not so subtle. I myself get motion sickness relatively easily. So I find that static 360 wallpapers work best for me. This was one of my early favorites, a space capsule orbiting the Earth. This one has a lot of motion, and I found that I could last about 10 seconds with that background before I got nauseous. And who wouldn't want to work at a ski resort or hang out in a cartoon cave? Or get your work done from the boardroom? Or who doesn't want to work from a beach every day? For putting together this demo, I used voice cues to start and stop recording on the Oculus. It was a huge time saver. And you can use voice cues to do a number of things like take photos, turn the device off, stuff like that. Are there any introverts listening in on the talk? I'd ask you to speak up, but I know that you won't. So jumping into VR to do development with headphones and the VR setup, some good coding music, it can help you find that flow state. And this applies to introverts, extroverts, and everybody in between. So in spite of my great experiences using VR for development, there are some opportunities for improvement. I'm a touch typist, and I use an ergonomic split keyboard like this. And there's a feature where they can overlay a virtual keyboard over your physical keyboard. And it's pretty useful. I've found that it can get out of sync after a while. And so if you rely on looking at the keyboard to type, you might struggle. If you watch the demos on Immersed's website, I mean, when it works, it does work pretty well as long as it stays in sync. But personally, even as a touch typist, when I move my right hand from the keyboard to the mouse and then back, I find myself struggling often to find the J key. And so I'm moving my pointer finger around often, looking for that little bump. So one subtlety that would really speed up my workflow is if they got the virtual keyboard overlay to work maybe a little bit easier and with split ergonomic keyboards or non-standard, non-flat keyboards. So currently, support for iOS devices is kind of gimmicky. If you need to test on a physical device rather than a simulator, where you're interacting with the screen by touching it, then you kind of need to exit VR and look at the screen, which can be kind of annoying to have to jump in and out of VR. I mean, the screen mirroring is definitely useful. And in this demo video, I've basically lifted my headset up a little bit so that I can actually look right through at the device itself. The hand tracking between virtual reality and real reality isn't really configured to track your phone as well. So that would be a big improvement. And screen resolution. I have to keep the screen resolution relatively low. I don't have a gigabit network at home. The text on the screens, though, is completely readable. The fidelity of the text is pretty good. I don't really have a lot of issues with that. Occasionally, I do experience some glitches. And you'll notice in this image, my hands are a darker shade of pink. And there's those rays shooting out from my hands, which means my hands are ready to start interacting with the configuration, which is not ideal if that's not your goal. Every now and then I might have a screen temporarily freeze, and this may just be related to not having a gigabit network at home. And ultimately it comes back, but it might be a few seconds or sometimes as long as like 10 seconds before your screen unfreezes and you see your mouse cursor on it again. And typically this happens to one screen at a time, not all of them. And then there's VR face. There's nothing like showing up to a meeting looking like this. So there's a few workarounds. You can figure out how long it takes for that to wear off and just jump out of VR ahead of your meeting long enough. You can use the virtual avatar, which you may or may not have seen me doing earlier. Or you can just keep your video off. Oh, I might have forgotten to mention, this is actually a gaming platform primarily. So there's some really fun games that you can play. This one's called virtual reality. And you're basically a human slave to AIs. And this game is called First Steps. It's Facebook's flagship app. And it really just demonstrates some of the immersive experiences that they can do in virtual reality. In this case, I'm remotely controlling a blimp. You can go and pick things up and pull a tab, and then it shoots off. It's really interesting to interact with. And of course, what gaming platform is complete without Angry Birds? So there is a learning curve. It takes a little while to learn the ropes with your VR setup, the Oculus itself. It takes a little while to configure your VR and learn the hand gestures. By default, you have to manually go in and configure to use hand gestures instead of relying on the controllers. It takes a while to learn how the Immersed app works, learn the menus, the hand gestures that are specific to Immersed, and just getting familiar with locking and unlocking the screens, figuring out your screen sizes and positions. So you should plan on taking a week to really get kind of comfortable in your development environment and getting it set up and configured the way you want it. And so these are the menus in Immersed. And so there are a lot of options. All right, my synopsis is, it's not perfect, but it is incredibly useful. It's helpful for focusing. If you can ignore email and Slack or whatever communication channels you have. It is immersive, hence the name. You can use it for 8 or more hours a day. I would suggest having it plugged in though, so that your battery life doesn't impact your productivity. You may get some weird looks. It is under active development. There are frequent bug fixes and new features. You can file bugs, feature requests, and get support directly through Discord. You can literally chat with the CEO of the company. I know we've hit time. I wanted to leave some time for Q&A.
Yes, people can unmute themselves now and ask questions.
All right.
Hi, thanks, Eric. This was amazing. I just had this question. Other than it being immersive and giving you a highly focused mode, what are the other advantages of this for you?
Sorry, I'm having trouble hearing you. You're really quiet.
I was asking, other than it being immersive and giving you a lot of focus, what other advantages did you sense with this?
Yeah, I would say those probably are the primary advantages. You know, having 5 screens can definitely gives you a lot more screen real estate. Some other things that I didn't mention, I have a stand desk that I can either sit at or stand at. And, having 5 screens on a desk like that isn't really viable. So having this set up, it really allows me to do exactly that. But yeah, I would say that those probably to tout are the major advantages.
I just realized you don't have an external monitor, so that's, yeah, I get it now. And then does this, like, the weight of that for 8 hours, that doesn't cause you any problems?
It doesn't. No, I mean, it's not as heavy as you would think, I guess.
Okay, question from the Zoom chat. Can it be used for virtual exhibitions? More and more museums already have them.
I don't know the answer to that. I would not be surprised if it can.
Okay, another Zoom chat. Do we need a powerful graphic card to run it? Is it mostly powered by the headset?
That is a great question, and I actually don't know the answer to that. I can say that it works on my M1 MacBook Air with no issues. But I think that actually is pretty decent as far as graphics go. I guess I would say I have 3 modern Macs that I haven't noticed any issues with. That actually would be a really good question for the Discord channels. You'll find that there's a lot of people in those channels that have varying types of hardware, Windows, Mac, Linux, with different configurations. All right, well, I think I've gone over. Okay, one more question. Using a virtual keyboard instead. I would say that using a physical keyboard is the way to go. And the reason I say that is the virtual keyboard, the way you interact with it is by taking your hand like this and using a pinching gesture to shoot a ray out to type on it. And that, for me, that is far less productive than typing on a physical keyboard. But I would challenge you to prove me to find a better way. I mean, I'm doing what I'm comfortable with. Your mileage may vary. Well, thank you, everyone.